Welcome to Bleacher Report's NFL Daily. It's Super Bowl week. I'm Mitch. In this live stream, we're going to break down the biggest difference makers for the Eagles and the Chiefs. The players, maybe the coaches, that can make the biggest difference, and whether or not the Chiefs three-peat or the Eagles pull off the upset. We're talking about the 5 biggest X factors in this video. And at the end, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on the 5 best destinations for none other than Myles Garrett, arguably the most talented defensive player in the sport right now. That will be at the end. But first, we're going to break down the X factors in the Super Bowl. So let us know in the chat what you guys think. Let me know which players, which coaches you think are the biggest X factors. It could be as little as one of the guards or a defensive tackle, or it could be as big as Jalen Hurts has to play well. Let us know in the chat. Let's get it started, guys, with our 5th X factor. The first X factor. So we're going to work our way up to like most important, least important to most important, okay? So the least important, but important aspect of this game, obviously, is Kansas City's ability to affect the running game of Saquon Barkley and the Philadelphia Eagles. And at the core of their defense and at the core of their game plan for Steve Spagnuolo, it will be the linebackers for the Kansas City Chiefs. And there is a specific name that I think everybody has to know. Chiefs fans know who this is, Leo Chenal. But not a lot of NFL fans know who Leo Chenal is. Now, Leo Chenal has factored in a major way in the past 2 Super Bowls that the Chiefs have won. He is their 3rd linebacker. And as their 3rd linebacker, Leo Chenal can play off the ball or he can play on the line of scrimmage, basically dictating which, formation and personnel package the Chiefs come out in defensively. When teams like to run the ball, Spagnuolo deploys Chenal in a multitude of ways, whether as that sledgehammer taking on guards and centers in the middle or by setting the edge. Okay, we saw this primarily against Christian McCaffrey and the 49ers in last Super Bowl, setting the edge of the wide zone running attack. And then in the year previous, we also saw him heavily involved against the Eagles in that Super Bowl 57 to help slow down Miles Sanders in that game, contain Miles Sanders, that running game in that one. You look at what Chenal has been able to do, and it's kind of an interesting thing because it's going to be dictated whether or not he's on the field by what the Eagles deploy from an offensive standpoint. If the Eagles are going to play with 3 receivers on the field, it's less likely that Chenal will be on the field. But if the Eagles look to go with more 2 tight ends and like to really run the ball on the Chiefs, and even I think on early downs in general, I think Chenal will be factored in a lot. On short yardage, I think Chenal will be factored in a lot. On the tush-push plays, I think Chenal will be factored in a lot. In the Super Bowl against the Eagles, he did have a sack in that game. He also had 6 tackles and a tackle for loss, despite only playing 24% of those snaps. In the Super Bowl against San Francisco, he only played 36%, but he had 6 tackles, a forced fumble, a quarterback hit, and a tackle for loss. So this is one of the more low-key names to pay attention to, but Chenal is one of those players that football nerds are really going to get into just by watching, okay, when is he on the field? When is he not on the field? Are the Chiefs rolling out with 3 linebackers? Because their 3 linebackers, Nick Bolton leads the way, Drew Tranquil, and then Leo Chenal is that 3rd linebacker. Now, when it comes to Nick Bolton, he's also an X factor because he's involved not only in terms of the run defense, but he's very heavy in terms of if you see the Chiefs bringing extra players, if you see the Chiefs bringing blitzes at Jalen Hurts, Nick Bolton is very disruptive as a blitzer. He's also going to be heavily involved in potentially containing Jalen Hurts as a rusher. Bolton had one of the biggest plays in Super Bowl 57 with that fumble return for a touchdown. Everybody remembers that play. That was one of, if not the biggest play of the game. He had 13 tackles and 2 quarterback hits in last year's Super Bowl against San Francisco. So he's a guy that's always involved in these big games for Kansas City's defense. And I think these linebackers are so important because they're going to need to deploy all three in different ways. Tranquil could also be pretty involved in terms of his ability to be on the edge, or maybe even occasionally in coverage against somebody like Dallas Goedert, who's going to be a pretty key matchup as well. Bolton might also factor in coverage on Saquon. So you have to watch these linebackers and see how Spags is utilizing them as blitzers, as run defenders, and as coverage players. Checking out the chat real quick. We got Chief Gang or Don't Bang. We got in the chat. Football guy likes Xavier Worthy. I did not include him actually in this video, but definitely came to mind. I feel like a lot of people are going to be talking about Xavier Worthy, one of the impact rookies in this game. But I have an impact rookie in this game for the other side of the football field that I want to talk about. So at number 4, we're going to talk about Cooper DeJean, the nickel corner of the Philadelphia Eagles. Cooper DeJean last week had 2 passes defensed and 6 tackles versus Washington. Okay, this season, he's been one of not only the best rookies in the NFL, but one of the best corners in the NFL. 3rd in PFF grade, 2nd in run defense grade, and 6th in coverage grade. He also had 5 picks this season. So DeJean is an awesome football player. But why I think he's an X factor is a specific reason. There is no team in the NFL that throws the ball short or behind the line of scrimmage more than the Kansas City Chiefs, okay? And DeJean, as that nickel corner, is going to have to be involved heavily in a multitude of ways. First, tackling, right? So if they throw a screen to Worthy, does DeJean get out there and make that hit, where he's been so prominent this season? Cooper DeJean could be really involved in the run game. If the Eagles choose to play a lot of their nickel-based defense with 2 linebackers and 3 corners on the field, DeJean is going to have to be involved in setting the edge and getting in there and stopping Kareem Hunt or Isaiah Pacheco. And third, whenever they go to this RPO game, DeJean's going to have to make the correct decision. You know, where is he in the zone? Is he in the right spot? How fast is he reacting? You know, those sort of things. And the Chiefs are really going to try to play with him constantly in this game, trying to open up the space in the middle of the field. And the last reason he could be really involved is by just simply playing man-to-man on Travis Kelce, you know, like one of the greatest receivers in Super Bowl history. So Cooper DeJean is going to have to cover Travis Kelce probably on a few plays in this game, man-to-man, mano-a-mano, solo, right, one-on-one. So he's going to have to take him out of the game. I will say, you know, you look at some of those stats just to back up what I was saying about the Chiefs throwing the ball, you know, short, okay? So Patrick Mahomes has targeted receivers behind the line of scrimmage on a career high 26.9% of attempts. That resulted in 851 passing yards this year. That was the 2nd most in the NFL behind only Baker Mayfield. And it was a league high 45 first downs. He has accounted in general for 5 of the top 6 seasons since 2016 on passing attempts behind the line of scrimmage. This has become the Chiefs' offense. Behind the line of scrimmage, quick throws. And they want to avoid the Eagles' pass rush. So for the Eagles to be successful, they need some plays on the ball. They need some great tackling from their nickel corner. They need some big plays from their nickel corner. Now, the Eagles' defense, where DeJean is coming big, the Eagles' defense has allowed the fewest yards per attempt and the lowest success rate on passes thrown behind the line of scrimmage this season. And that is largely in part because of how athletic, physical, and just how much of a stud this Cooper DeJean is, okay? So pay attention to that. That is a huge factor because at the end of the day, this season, we might recall Patrick Mahomes from 2018 throwing bombs all over the field to Tyreek Hill. But this year, Patrick Mahomes has been the worst quarterback in the NFL, hitting at only 26% of his passes beyond 20 yards. The worst quarterback in the NFL. So if the Eagles can force Mahomes to throw the ball deep and not be productive short and force them into, instead of 3rd and 2s, it's 3rd and 6 because of a great tackle made by DeJean, or it's a 2nd and 12 because he blew a play up on a screen, that's going to make a major impact in this game. So that's why he's my 4th X factor for sure. Hopefully the field doesn't ruin the game this time. That's an interesting one. I don't think so. I mean, that last time they played, that was pretty bad. I do recall that was last year. It wasn't really a problem for the Niners game. It was obviously a different stadium. Armani says Noah Gray. Noah Gray is actually going to be a part of one of our discussions for sure. So just stay tuned for that because Noah Gray will be important in this game for sure. Let's get to our next one, who's also a Philadelphia Eagle. Had a big game against the Chiefs in Super Bowl 57. I think he could have even a bigger game in Super Bowl 59. His name is none other than Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert is probably the most underrated tight end in football, or has been for the last about 5 years, in my opinion. I believe he led the NFL in yards per route run versus man coverage, and that's going to come in handy against the Kansas City Chiefs because the Chiefs are probably going to play very testy on the outside, a lot of press, a lot of man, and they're going to try to sell out to stop Saquon. So who is the mismatch that the Eagles can go to in those situations? In my opinion, his name is Dallas Goedert. At the tight end position, the Chiefs have really struggled to defend that position all season, okay? They've allowed the most yards, over 1,100, nearly 1,200 yards this season. I believe those were just regular season stats too. And the fourth most catches to the position this season. Now, part of that is because their safeties aren't great in man-to-man. Their nickel is a little bit of a struggle. So Connor typically is like their big sub linebacker, defensive back, nickel back. They also have Justin Reed, who struggled this year a little bit. Cook doesn't really play on tight ends, but those guys are all kind of involved in covering that position. And I don't think any of them can do an adequate job of slowing down as good of a player as Dallas Goedert. I honestly thought that Super Bowl 57, he had an even bigger day than the stats say. He only had 60 yards, 6 catches for 60 yards, 7 targets. I remember watching that game and feel like Dallas Goedert had every big catch in the game. I don't know if it's just me but it definitely had that vibe. Maybe a lot of them were on third down. So watch out for that. Third down, one-on-one. Who is Hurts going to? If A.J. Brown has McDuffie on him and Devontae Smith is doubled, it could be Dallas Goedert. So that could be the mismatch. Goddard's also been very involved in getting the offense going into the flats and things like that. He's very, very involved in the RPO game as well. And obviously, he's a great run blocker. So Goddard's going to be a huge X factor, being that this has been the Chiefs' biggest weakness defensively all season, the tight end position. The chat. Jahan Dotson. Interesting. I don't really think he'll be an X factor. I don't think he's going to be relevant enough to be an X factor, but I could see him catching a couple passes in this game just because the Chiefs will look to funnel him the ball probably more than people would expect. I wouldn't be shocked though if he had like a touchdown or like a big play or something. For sure. All right, getting to the next one. We've got at number 2. We talked about Noah Gray. The Chiefs in 2 tight end formations, okay? And the Chiefs' ability to dictate in 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends and 1 running back, and how that will affect their running game. So for the Chiefs, they need to be able to run the ball a little bit. And I think that was the most overlooked reason the Chiefs won the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 57. Because if you recall correctly, Patrick Mahomes, he only had 27 attempts in that game, and he didn't even throw for 200 yards, if I'm not mistaken. He did have over 200 total yards if you include his rushing, but he didn't have 200 yards throwing, okay? A lot of their ground game and their clock management was key to that game, along with the special teams and defensive plays that came with that one. But the Eagles' ability to stop the run out of their 2 high coverages has been one of their biggest strengths all season. It's kind of the cheat code of Vic Fangio's defense. When Vic Fangio has a good, beefy defensive line that can hold up in the run game without having to sell out to stop the run, it's like a defensive cheat code because you're able to stop the run out of pass coverage. You're basically playing a lot of coverage without resorting the resources to stop the run, and you're still stopping the run, right? So when you look at the Chiefs, can they run the ball against these light boxes? Because the Eagles defend the run with a light box, 6 or fewer defenders in the box on 68.5% of runs. That is 10% lower than any other team. 10% lower than any other team. So the Chiefs' ability to get 3, 4 yards just consistently out of the running game against the Eagles' front to be able to just matriculate the ball down the field and keep themselves out of 2nd and 3rd and longs is going to be huge, okay? The Eagles, they also allow a pretty good amount of yards after contact per run with a light box. They have the 6th highest rate at 3.45. And the Chiefs don't get stuffed on those runs. They're the 2nd best at not getting stuffed, which if you ever watch the Chiefs, that makes a lot of sense because Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith are awesome. And then Kareem Hunt's a bowling ball and he never gets tackled behind the line of scrimmage. In Super Bowl 57, the Chiefs had 89 yards against light boxes on 13 carries. That was a really key part of that game. So the ability to run the ball. And the way the Chiefs might look to do this is by adding an extra tight end, by having Travis Kelce and Noah Gray on the field. Okay. So the ability to run the ball, but then also asking the Eagles to cover those players out of passing concepts. So so the Eagles, they are in there to stop 2 tight ends, but at the same time, they're still going to play their nickel personnel. So how did the Eagles treat that? How did the Eagles defend the 2 tight ends? Do they decide to put Cooper DeJean on Kelce and play with 3 corners? Or do they try to get a little bit bigger and try to add a linebacker to the field? Do they try to shift their coverages so that they're not playing as much too high? Do they add another safety to the box like CJ Gardner-Johnson? They could do that as well. So there's a lot of different ways they could do that, but you look at the tight ends as well in this matchup, and obviously Kelce's big. We talked a little bit about that with the Cooper DeJean potential matchup, but the Eagles did allow the lowest yards per catch to the tight end position this year. One thing that has changed, though, has been in the playoffs. They have allowed a lot of yards to tight ends. Zach Ertz had 104 yards last week on 16 targets, and Tyler Higbee had 54 yards and a touchdown on 7 catches and 10 targets in the week previous. So they've found those holes, and I think a lot of that has come down to there's no more Nakobe Dean. There's more Burks on the field. He's a weakness. The Chiefs attacked him in the Super Bowl last year when he was on San Francisco, taking over for Dre Greenlaw. So watch out for the tight ends. Watch out for the running game. That's an X factor in this one. If Noah Gray could catch a few passes to get drives started, if Kelce can convert some 3rd downs, and they can run the ball out of those 12 personnel formations, that's going to allow the Chiefs to have a lot of success and ball control, which is something you want to do against the Eagles because that's basically their entire game plan. All right. M. Johnson says, if Kansas City plays press or cover 1, Smith and Brown feast. I will say it's going to be interesting to see because I don't really have this in my X factors. It will be interesting to see how the Chiefs do this. Do they try to? They're going to have to stack the box. They're probably going to have to stack the box. They did that against the Niners and they did that against the Eagles the year before, and they forced Hurts to throw the ball. But can McDuffie hold up if he's going against A.J. Brown a lot one-on-one, or do they decide to put McDuffie in the slot against Devontae Smith, where likely Devontae Smith will be oftentimes in this game because they want to probably try to move him into the slot because that's where Kansas City is weakest. Maybe they double A.J. Brown and put McDuffie on Devontae Smith, or what do? They double Goedert occasionally because he's going to be a problem for them. So the choices of Spags is going to be very critical in this game for sure. I don't disagree. The refs are the biggest X factor. Of course. I don't know how to predict or project the refs, so I'm just going to stay out of that discussion. But of course, the refs are a huge X factor, no question about it. Refs just make the calls, brother. They don't decide the game, says Ramirez. At least somebody's positive. Somebody's positive in the chat. We like to see it. Our 5th and final and biggest X factor in this game, it's not a player, it's a set of coordinators. The biggest X factors in this game are the Eagles' offensive and defensive coordinator, Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. Okay? And ultimately, the reason I believe these guys are the biggest X factors is because I believe in my heart of hearts that the Eagles are the more talented roster. They're the better team in terms of the personnel that they offer. Okay? They have the better running back. They have the better offensive line. They have the better defensive line. They have the better secondary. They probably have the better receivers. Okay? But at the end of the day, the reason the Chiefs win these big games is because they have Patrick Mahomes, and usually he's a lot better than Brock Purdy or Jimmy Garoppolo or Jalen Hurts, right? There's a reason why the only guy he lost to in the Super Bowl is Tom Brady. Okay, and there's a reason why the only other quarterback to beat him is Joe Burrow, right? Because you need a really great quarterback to usually beat Patrick Mahomes. But it's even more tough to beat the Chiefs when they also have a massive coaching edge. And typically, Steve Spagnuolo is the best defensive coach in these games, right? Typically, right? He totally outcoached Steve Wilkes last year, right? He's outcoached guys consistently in these big games. Sean McDermott last week, not even close, right? Like, not even close. On the other side, can Vic Fangio hang with Andy Reid? That's the question, right? And Vic Fangio was brought in as a little bit of a consultant for that Super Bowl 57. Didn't have the full feel and full game plan and full ability to put forth something for the Eagles, but he was brought in for a consultant, so he was at least involved. You know, Fangio was in Miami last year, and Fangio was in Denver against the Chiefs plenty of times in the AFC West. So he has plenty of film, plenty of history taking on Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And a lot of Chiefs fans would cite the fact that Mahomes has never lost, Reid has never lost to a team with Vic Fangio. But that's also kind of not fair because, I mean, who are his quarterbacks at times? Like in Denver, I don't think he ever had a quarterback. So that's not really fair to me. Like their teams weren't very good. So it's like really hard to say. But, you know, breaking this down further, like offensively for Kellen Moore, will he be able to have a game plan for Hurts to be able to get rid of the ball and have answers against the blitz? Because we know that Spagnuolo is going to blitz. The Chiefs, when they don't blitz, they're the 30th best defense in football against the pass. When they don't blitz and they send 4, they're not a good pass defense, okay? When they blitz, they're probably the best defense against the pass when they blitz, right? When teams blitz, they're probably the most effective at it. They're very timely with it, and they're very good at it. Now, last week, they didn't do it very much against Josh Allen. That's Josh Allen. That's a different beast. That's a different animal who's proven consistently that against the blitz, he'll torch you. But with Jalen Hurts, he's had his problems with the blitz, right? This year, he's been better. There's no question about that. This year, he's been better, and I think a lot of that has come down to Kellen Moore. He's given him more answers, right? What do the Eagles do from a formation standpoint? Are they going to play a lot of spread and try to spread out and not allow Spags to send those corners on blitzes? Or are they going to have a lot of stacks and bunches in order to get some separation for their receivers against these corners that are maybe playing a lot of press and stuff like that? So that's going to be a question. But ultimately, for the offensive side, for Kellen Moore, it's going to be, let's not sway too far away from what we've been. Let's go with Saquon Barkley. Let's see if they can stop Saquon Barkley. Let's go with Jalen Hurts running the ball. But then on those big downs and in those money situations, in the red zone, on 2-point conversions, on 4th down, do we just have enough flavor, enough like for us to win this game, right? Like Josh Allen, the Bills, more importantly, Joe Brady, he didn't have a good enough game plan, right? We didn't really see the answers in the big spots. We didn't see the 2 points. We saw a consistency of like just kind of predictability with him where it was like, okay, they're going to tush push every single time, and it didn't work, right? They got away from James Cook too often. Do the Eagles do that with Saquon Barkley? You would think not, obviously. So with Kellen Moore, it kind of comes down to that stuff. And for the other side, it's a lot more complicated, you know. And then can Kellen Moore kind of find those mismatches occasionally? Like, can he get Devontae Smith with a matchup? Can he get A.J. Brown on a big play? Can he get Dallas Goedert with those consistent matchups? Like, those are also things that will factor in there. But I think it's pretty bread and butter when it comes to offense. It's more so the defensive side where you're really intrigued when it comes to Vic Fangio versus Andy Reid, right? And I think one of the big matchups that I wanted to include as an X factor is Milton Williams on the inside of this defense, because Milton Williams is probably the most underrated player on the Philadelphia Eagles. He will be facing a lot of one-on-ones on the offensive line of the Chiefs. Okay, Milton Williams will be taking on Frank Caliendo, not the comedian, the guard, in this game quite often. And Milton Williams actually was the second best pass rusher this season from the interior defensive line in the entire NFL, according to PFF, in terms of grade. Okay, the second best pass rusher. In the playoffs, he has 10 pressures in the playoffs, which is tied for the second most with Chris Jones, only behind his teammate, Jalen Carter. Because Jalen Carter is so destructive and dominant, he's going to get doubled. So can Milton Williams dominate one-on-ones against Frank Caliendo and get pressure? That would allow Vic Fangio to contain Mahomes in the pocket often and not allow Mahomes to run, okay? Making Mahomes hold the ball is the key to the game. If the secondary can disrupt these receivers, make them hold the ball, and the pass rush can get home, it's easier said than done. That's how the Eagles win this game, right? And that is by mixing in your coverages, not allowing Mahomes to have a beat on what you're doing, like know where the answers are pre-snap, like actually giving him disguise, giving him the occasional blitz, right? The simulated pressures. But then when you look at it statistically, when Mahomes holds the ball, they don't win as much, right? When he holds the ball, they are 19-15, which for the Chiefs is pretty crazy. When he holds the ball for 3 seconds in a game, on average, they're 19-15. The Eagles have the best secondary in the league. Many people believe that. Can they make Mahomes hold the ball? And then that's where pressure comes. That's where the ad-lib plays from Mahomes comes. That's where more turnovers happen, more sacks happen, more throwaways happen, more negative plays happen. And the Chiefs are the kings at avoiding negative plays, okay? In the only game this year that the Chiefs lost against Buffalo, he held the ball on average for 3.35 seconds per play against Buffalo. That was their only loss. So can Fangio force Mahomes to hold the ball? And can they get pressure when that happens? Milton Williams will be a key X factor there as well. Okay. So those are your Super Bowl X factors, guys. Julian says Chiefs situational football. Absolutely. Third down, red zone, fourth down, special teams, all key factors in any football game, especially the Super Bowl. That is also what won them the Super Bowl 57, to be fair. For sure. I mean, special teams was a huge factor, and the fourth quarter at the end of the day. Ramirez says, let's get this three-peat Mahomes. Can't wait for the Super Bowl. We know that, just to finish off on that last point, we know that the game plan for the Chiefs is going to be, let's get the ball out fast. We're going to throw it, a lot, probably a lot of volume, a lot of quick throws. Like, we're going to try to get the ball out. And that's going to be kind of, to me, that's going to be the game. I think we're going to know within the first half. If the Chiefs are just slicing up the Eagles and Mahomes comes to the line of scrimmage and he's like, oh, it's cover 4, it's cover 2. I know what the play is. I'm going to get it out and it's going to be a completion. If it's the same completion percentage he had in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, where it was like 21 for 27, they're not going to win this game. But if the Eagles can disrupt a little bit and force that pressure to get home, that's going to be the difference in the game, in my opinion. So those are your Super Bowl X factors, guys.